content of this channel is for mature audiences. Parental discretion is advised. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell notification button. And please, feel free to share the video. Thank you.
What's good, everybody? You know who I am, man. I'm GG, man. You tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. It's the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up, with no chasers, man. You know? And before I get things started, man, the first thing I want to do is say, what's cracking, haters, man? I hope y'all all good, man. I hope all my haters out there having a good afternoon, man. What's happening with y'all, man? And if you haven't done so already, man, make sure you hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell notification button so you can stay abreast of what's cracking here on the Green Gorilla channel. And I want to give a shout out to all the people, man, who've just blessed me thus far, man. So shout out to R Jizzle, sorry about that, Electrician 480, Barry Little, and Mr. Heat. Hey, Mr. Heat, man, for that one, I ain't gonna even lie, man. You deserve a warm welcome and a whole bunch of noise for that. Thank y'all all for that donation, but honors go to Mr. Heat. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. And also, I want to give a shout out to War Child Games. Thank you for that donation, sir. Appreciate that. Thank y'all. And before I get things started, like I always do, I want to give a shout out to each and every member of the Green Gorilla channel and to thank all of my subscribers and supporters, okay? So let's take care of that right now, man. Shout out to Jermaine Kamal, Brotherly Love 215, Adrian Thomas, J. Cleveland Green, Outside the Cube, Lee Ways, Electrician 480, Gabinga O, and Herbert Lewis. Thank y'all. Big up. Big up to Cutting Up with the Jones, Zanco 1, D. Scott, Julius Ferguson, Path Guy 74, Blacksword 404, Pete Rock, Tahuti of New Comet, Gold Professor, and Aaron Peters. Big up to y'all. Big up to Barnolas, hiphop.catv, Dardar, Michael Ross, Vincent Lindsay, Michael Pierce, Beautiful Trauma, Quiz the Poet, Black Quizzard 80OS, and Jazz Tech. Big up. Big up to Shadow Observer, Sugar T, Artisan MC, Nasiana, Kyle J. Sura, Kareem, Troy Warren, Jeff R., Mrs. KP Bailey, and Ricky Dawson. Big up. Big up to Alan Wiley, The Face, Mantis on Break, Life of Commerce, True 7360, Marvin Evans, A. Wilson's Ghost, Timothy Blewett, Jeffrey Speed, and Marvin Battle Jr. Big up. Big up to Mark Holt, John J, Afro Troop TV, Adam, BGS Ibmore, Ignatz Mouse, Brian Peaks, Papa Didas, and Scott Haywood. Big up. Big up to Black Uru Strikes, Dr. Tree 33, Leroy Honeycutt, Broken Blaze, Super Tech, 77 Base X, Brian McMurray, Karen S, Anthony Davis, and Seven Coast Dojo. Big up. Big up to Charles Rogers, Rick Ross, Sandra Jean, Charles Gilmore, Patricia Colley, Greg, Barry Little, Mr. Valentino, Jason Hales, and Black Men Being Brutally Honest. Big up. Big up to Cameron 87, Doc LaRock, Mark Swift, Odd Collar, Donna Watts, Coach Hotep, Old Soul Chief, Mr. Blue Collar, I'm Just Jules, TD Hip Hop Media, and Drew Main. Big up. Big up to Mr. Heat, Sir Anthony, ML Law, Universal 178, Rasheed Barnes, Aaron Smith, DH, C-Truth the Revelator, Aaron Infinite, and Dr. Tiasan Johnson. And on my Patreon side, I want to give a shout out to J Live, Rashawn Phillips, Keith Bass, Nick, Malcolm Smith, Rock 1, Albert C., Dr. Ben Vincent, I Am the Light of My Father, Waffle Weave, William Joyner, Tyrone Hampton, Darnell Smith, Excalibur, Anu 219, Pursuer Prisoner, Taz, Dragon 59, Adrian Hicks, Jay Bailey, Mr. Michi, NEU, Momal, and Asangwa. And I cannot forget my brothers in heaven, Force Windu, Kevin Samuels, and the brother David Carroll. Big up to all y'all, man. You deserve a round of applause. Thank you so much for supporting the Green Gorilla channel on an ongoing basis. And if you are inquiring about how you can also help support the Green Gorilla channel on an ongoing basis, well, you know, here's how you do it. What's good, everybody? I'm the G with a PhD, and you're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel, the place where black men can express themselves freely. Straight up, no chaser. Today, I want to introduce you to my new membership program that consists of 5 levels where you can invest in the Green Gorilla channel on a monthly basis and receive level-specific perks. Memberships are special because they improve the quality of the content of the channel and will help me to be able to keep the channel going. Now, to participate in the Green Gorilla channel membership program, all you have to do is hit the join button, which is located right next to the subscribe button on my channel page. Now, for all of my subscribers who decide not to participate in my membership program, nothing will change. The content will keep coming the way it always has. Thanks for watching, and be careful out here, people. Bless. All right, man, we back. You know who I am. I'm GG. You tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. It's the place where black men can express themselves freely. No chasers, man. So if you're scared, go to church. You know what I mean? If you got some issues with hearing real talk, ride on out. Public discretion.
The content of this channel is for mature audiences. Parental discretion is advised.
Yeah, so if you're scared, go to church, man. Ain't nothing wrong with it. But you know, I got some guests, man, today. I got the Nameless protagonist in the building. And I got my frat brother, man, Admiral Smoke. What's up, Doug?
What's going on, team?
Ost to my brother Nameless, man. What's cracking?
Man, nothing much, man. Like I said, like I told you backstage, man, I'm putting this S-curl in.
Let your soul glow, bro.
Yo, man, I'm telling you, fam, I'm putting my S-curl in, man. I don't know, man. I've been, you know what I'm saying, I've been on this James Brown kick, man, lately, the last month and a half, man, and I feel the need to take it to the next level.
Man, you tripping, bro. You tripping out here, boy. Let me find out, man, your pillow, man, got grease on it and shit.
Car seat mad than a mug.
Let me find out you got acne and shit because you clogging up your pores with some S-curl juice, bro. You got, you know, adolescent acne or something, man. But anyway, man, on a serious note, man, you know, today we're here to talk about an important subject. I mean, and I'm gonna give you the floor, Sandog and Nameless. And, you know, I'm going to interject as I always do. You know, I'm very opinionated. However, I want you to kind of give an adumbration of what we've been discussing thus far and how this particular segment of what we've been doing thus far fits into the whole schema. So take it from there, my brother.
Yeah, so what we've been doing so far, we've been talking about changing the narrative of kind of like what you're hearing in popular media and from certain factions of the black community that, you know, we've never done anything. We sat on our hands and we just took it. And then people who come from the stance of, you know, racism doesn't exist, you know, in the world, doesn't see color. And so basically we're showing you how this has always been a part of the state. It's been animated by the state and upheld by the state. And so, you know, that, you know, again, you know, outline or bringing up these historical facts, you know, hopefully are things that kind of get people to see things from a particular perspective, right? So, even in my opening statement, like, there's a lot of rhetoric out there now about, even for, the slave trade itself, when it was talking about how people will say, well, blacks sold other blacks. And even then, that is historically incorrect, because at the end of the day, uh, for Africans, the whole concept of black, this did not exist for them. This will be something that will be imposed on them later, seen through Western lenses from the outside. Because for people across the continent of Africa, they would either be identified mainly, uh, especially in West Africa, through kinship ties, right? So you would have your family, your clan, your tribe, and for the most part, many people lived in somewhat of a confederacy of decentralized, villages. So, and in that lifestyle, many of them would have been opposed to foreign slavery. So, a lot of who would probably help facilitate the slave trade will be larger African kingdoms. And even for some of those larger kingdoms, again, they will be coerced, into the slave trade. So, again, if Gigi's a noble and I'm somebody from Portugal or Britain, I'm like, yo, fam, if you don't do this for me, I'm gonna shoot you and then take your people, right?
But let
And
me let
so,
me let me let me let me let me say something, right?
yeah,
And I want to interject into this real quick. Okay. Like recently, I think Don Lemon was on whatever talk show he's on, man. He's a talking head, a pundit in, the social political arena. And he was having a conversation with some white woman, and the white woman went on to talk about the merits of British culture and how, they are the first nation to abolish slavery while African nations were still engaged in the practice of, corralling and selling slaves. Okay. Now, first and foremost, I just want to say, 300 years after the fact, because the British, they got started in the slave trade in the fucking, the end of the 13th century, damn near. We talking about the late 1400s, right? All up to the 1800s. And then in the 1800s, they decided to put a stop to it. Shit, you done already done 300 motherfucking years worth of damage, bruh. 300 years. And also, I'm not excusing Africans for selling their ancestors. And to be quite honest, Africa is not a monolithic continent. Just like the French were at war with the British, were at war with the Swedes and all of this kind of shit, the Germans. Hey, look, it is what it is. But we're talking about what's happening with us in America. We talking about ADOS people. And we can point the finger at Africans or whatever. But one of the things you got to be aware of is there's a Gustavus Vassa. You ever heard of him?
Yeah.
Olado Equiano. Did you have to read him? When you're in college, many people don't know about Gustavus Vassa or Olado Equiano, okay? I had to read the dude when I was in college. And I can tell you, qualitatively, one's experiences in slavery or as a slave, it was radically different. And if you're a slave in Africa than it is if you're a slave in America or in the Americas in general. It's an entirely different kind of slave-based system, okay? Entirely different. Go read Olado Equiano. Go read Gustavus Vassa, and you'll see the difference because it's a narrative, a set of narratives, and some people say that it's not real. Bullshit. I believe it's real. So at any rate, the whole point is he talks about his life in captivity in various nations, okay? And so you can see that there's a qualitative difference between slavery in different cultures and societies throughout time. Look, even David Walker made mention of the fact that, a slave in Greece or in Rome had a whole lot of different sets of privileges than the average slave in America, in the antebellum and the postbellum South, you know, the freed slaves. And we're going to talk about that in a second. But don't even try to compare transporting millions of motherfuckers from one landmass to another in order for them to work what?
From can't see to can't see, man.
To can't see. Don't even try to fucking compare and contrast that shit to what was happening in Africa. I'm not saying that the shit is problematic, but I am saying, come on, the two cannot be compared. And I don't like for people to try to compare it that way. And then also, this has significance and meaning in relation to this new movie that came out, The Woman King, which in and of itself is some bullshit, you know, that white women wrote. Let's face it, some white women wrote the fucking screenplay, produced and directed the damn film. They are the ones who pushed this shit through. And you know, they idealize and romanticize the homie who were engaged in, you know, some pretty unscrupulous practices. However, I'm not even trying to compare and contrast the small scale bullshit that the homie was engaged in with the fucking full-scale slave trade that was engaged in by the fucking British Empire. We not gonna even, or England, before it became the British Empire. I ain't even trying to go there. And, you know, like Don Lemon, man, that guy, to be quite honest, man, he's not a powerhouse intellectual, bro. He's not. But I'm gonna leave the shit to y'all, man. I'm gonna step back for a minute. I just wanted to point that out.
You know what? Let me say this too, because I want to extend that combo just in case, you know, folks is a little in. Article number 1, they helped found Jamestown. Are you kidding me? They want to act like, you know, well, we were just the bystander. No, you were a pillar in this industry. And it extends further to the point where by the time they pulled out, they were pretty much on top with the monopoly with regards to a lot of the way folks were able to process it. If you look at slaves as a market, you understand there's a concept of branding. I want you to understand, etymologically speaking, that's where this comes from. Branding. They would brand their seal onto individuals. And it was actually a mark, a kind of sign of, quote, quality, because they were looking for individuals that were already intellectually and spiritually indoctrinated into the lifestyle of being a slave. There was a specific type of person they're looking for to fulfill a lot of these roles. It was an understood process and modality that if you got people who experienced freedom prior, you had the risk of having problems down the line. So there were specific groups of people that were sought after. And if you had that brand of the British seal of approval here from the Royal African Company, it was an extra green light. It's a literal name brand before we even had a concept of name brand. So no, they're super capping with this nonsense. And what they didn't talk about was a lot of the political motivations as to why they stopped doing that. But I don't want to digress too much into it, but I wanted to give you guys some references so you can go back and take a look at this later. And we'll just say, with regards towards this Dahomey nonsense.
But also let me say this before we, you know, I just want y'all to take over because because I'll talk the whole damn time. So ultimately, the last thing I want to say before everything begins, and we get right off into this, right? The West as a whole, they got rich off the slave trade, man. I mean, that's how they came up. Their economy was in fucking tatters before they found the New World. They came over here and colonized it and exploited the people, expatriated the natives from their land, basically exploited us for our labor, and that's how the fuck they got rich. So all the so-called civilized culture that you want to continuously talk about how they got all this high civilization and culture, they came at your fucking expense. Those are the facts, man. That's just the reality. They got rich. William and Mary College and all this shit. Harvard, Princeton, Brown, all these motherfucking schools, they got funded initially through slave labor, bruh. It is what it is. So, you know, we can talk about, Oh, well, we can put a stop. Damn right you'll put a stop. That's like going, you ain't got to go to work no more when you got $1 million in the bank account, do you?
Right.
After you done got all the motherfucking money and the resources you need, okay, I'm done with it now. I just want to retire now.
And for the
So
record,
I'm just keeping it a buck, like, okay, now you got all you need out of this. You really can't make money off of it no more because you're not juxtaposed in the position. The colonies are perfectly, or, America's perfectly, circumstantially set up to where they can continuously engage in this practice and generate revenue from it. The British were not. It just is what it is. So, fuck what that lady was talking about. That's all I got to say, and I'm recede a bit and let y'all take over, man, because we got to get through this.
Right. Yeah. So just real quick, 2 books I put in the chat for you guys to have a reference to, if you want to take a look at a deeper investigation of what Gigi was just bringing up, so you have some references. The first one is called The American Slave Coast. Let me get back to what is the chat at right here. And the second one is called Empire of Cotton. The first one really breaks down what happened in response to the international slave trade getting shut down and the beginnings of the domestic slave trade here in America, which further set all of this apart. Hashtag, you can't compare us and what happened here to nobody else, even in history, followed by the Empire of Cotton, which really breaks the business down. And it shows you what was going on the GDP level. So you have a sense of orientation of the economic power this was creating and how the business actually worked and why the British had to pull out, why America and specifically the American South had a domination on this, and how important cotton has been through antiquity. So this will help contextualize the conversation and remove it from an emotional-based one to an evidence-based conversation. Sandog, you got it.
Yeah. And so, again, and these are the things, right, so that you don't get hoodwinked and bamboozled, in these arguments. Because, again, historically speaking, there were various forms of slavery. And again, what made one a slave, typically in the old world, will be if you were a criminal, if you were in debt, or if you were a prisoner of war. And like I said, and many times in Africa, especially, once you get into, the decentralized governments or some of the larger kingdoms, you would end up being incorporated, into some of these families or into that society. And unlike chattel slavery, you wouldn't be a slave for life, nor your children slaves into perpetuity, right? And so this is these are some of the major differences. And so it's one thing that you might have had some African kingdoms who engaged in slavery, right? But what they are not responsible for was everything that happened once you got on the boat, and then everything that happened once you got off the boat, right? And so at the end of the day, Africans would not be responsible for the slave codes of 1705. They wouldn't be responsible for the events that lead up to the Civil War, and they wouldn't be responsible for for Reconstruction and in the Jim Crow era, which is what we're here to kind of to continue talking about, and that's the premise of the show, right? And so again, shout out to my brothers, because again, I'm a conservative, right? But we have to we have to break that narrative of of the fact that a lot of things weren't about race. Now, one of the things I want to say is this: if you're looking at something like the Civil War or America from a completely economic standpoint, you can argue that the Civil War was about taxation, right, and money and everything else. But the problem is where the money was coming from, right? And so now you kind of run into an argument of, where will the moral aspects of capitalism exist, right? If, again, if any. And so, coming back to where we are now, right? And where I left you guys off before, right? We're talking about, black men in Reconstruction, you know, the Whig Party, which were a group of people that preferred Congress, over the president, right? Because they had their beefs, with the president at the time, Andrew Johnson. Sir, I believe his name was. And the Whigs weren't necessarily a abolitionist platform, so to speak. It was, again, it was kind of like this weird mix of different political bodies, and everything else, for the most part. And they supported, you know, they supported a lot of things in the government, that the Southerners didn't like. So they wanted, like, protectionist tariffs, and all of these other kind of things. And then the Whig Party would collapse, over the split of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, right? And so you're talking about the expansion of America westward, after the Louisiana Purchase, right? And then so you would get, I'm saying, you would get the Northern Whigs, right, that will go on and to become the Republican Party, which will be, the party, I'm saying, of anti-slavery and everything else. And then, the Southern Whigs will go into, other kind of, smaller, like I said, smaller little parties. But again, at that time, if you were pro-slavery, more than likely you would end up, in the Democratic Party back then. And so, kind of going along with the Kansas-Nebraska Act, right? You get, the Bleeding Kansas Massacre, where, again, where in Kansas you had people fighting, for who was slavery, who was anti-slavery, or what they were called at that particular time, border ruffians, right? And so this was something that happened, again, during just about, with tensions and leading up to the Civil War between 1854, and 1861. And what I'm trying to shape to you is that all of this is about you. When we talked about how states' rights ain't your rights, all of this is about you and how you could end up making money, for other people, right? And so now, when we, going into today's show, how we're talking about, it's not us, it's them. They couldn't let it go. And so at the end of the day, if 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 after slavery, if we were just brought into American society and we were allowed to thrive and function like everybody else, guess what? I might be crazy enough to sit on this panel in this chat and say that was a long time ago, right? But the but the issue is that even after the Civil War, with the Southerners, there were people that couldn't let it go. Why? Because that was their source of revenue. You're looking at 80% or better, of the GDP. And so even the North or the Union will feel that loss or that disruption in the GDP, once the slaves are free. And so now, again, you're starting to get black people, involved in the Republican Party. So you'll get our first black senator, right? Hiram Rhodes, right? And Hiram Rhodes, he lived from 1827 to 1901, right? So, he was an AME minister. He was back then the state legislator elected the Senate, right? So it wouldn't be until the 17th Amendment came where you could vote. Where you could vote for senators, through the popular vote. So the 17th Amendment hasn't happened yet. I think that was a ratification that came in 1913. And so for the fact checkers that's in the chat and everything else, if I'm wrong on that, you could check me and I'll take the correction, right? And so, Hiram Rhodes is now, he's now a Republican, an African American Republican during Reconstruction, right? And during the Civil War, he organized two regiments of black troops where he served as the chaplain for them. Later on, he will become president of Alcorn State University, right? When he was first elected, the Democrats didn't even want him in the Senate. And so, they was like, at the end of the day, they were trying to use the Dred Scott case to say that, he wouldn't be welcome as a senator because he's not a U.S. citizen. So now, mind you, the Civil War is over, right? The North won, and you got dudes in the South telling this newly elected black senator that based upon the Dred Scott case or the Dred Scott decision, you're not even a U.S. citizen. Therefore, how could you fulfill the obligations, of being a senator, right? And so if you wanted to fast forward to Barack Obama, right, you're going to hear like a lot of that type of rhetoric. And so the funny part was they wanted to use the narrow argument that, because he wasn't completely black or had some white lineage, that he was an octoroon and therefore should be allowed to, to come sit, to come sit in the Senate, right? And so eventually they get the votes, the brother gets to sit in the Senate. And again, and as soon as he's in there, right, he fought to return black legislators back to power in Georgia who were illegally kicked out by the Democratic Party, right? And now here's the thing again, because many Southern whites feared the fact that if black people gained political power or momentum, that we would be looking for revenge or to do something to them. And, here it is. Again, he himself, again, fresh out of slavery, but I believe Hiram was born free. Again, for the fact checkers, you can check me. But even then, he was like, look, we just want to progress and we want to advance, just like everybody else. So, we want to move forward, and we're not trying to move forward at the expense of white people. We're looking to move forward within American society on, like I said, on our own merit. But then obviously, that's a ship, that's a ship or an idea that's not going to sail, because at the end of the day, when you look at white supremacy or ultimately when you actually look at when you look at it at its core in terms of white survival. So at the end of the day, these people are motivated by some fear of loss, right? Which is, again, loss of life, loss of wealth, or whatever, or the other things that they will fear if black people came to power. But for black people, for the most part, all they simply wanted to do was to just get on, was to go and get on with their lives. And so while he was in the Senate, again, he got blacks to work at the Washington Navy Yard, where they were once excluded, during there. He even recommended a brother in the West Point, but unfortunately that was denied, right?
Now let me just interject real quick, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about black politicians at the end of the Civil War, okay? Yes. Men who fought in the war. Like, these aren't like conversationalists. Like, how we gonna corral blacks together and get them, to fight for their freedom? No, they actually did the shit, okay? Right. Like, these are facts, okay? They were members of the church. So there's some people who say, the church is this organization that leads to pacificity, and it kind of discourages radicalness in relation to, just being martial related to your own cause. Here we see an example of black men during Reconstruction who were church members, who fought in wars, and who, after having fought in those wars, were engaged. And it just has to be noted. This is a more hostile time in relation to race than there ever has been in the history of the United States about what kind of rights that black people should have, whether or not they should be allowed to vote and hold political office. These people were still, when they were in public office, doing all they could to look out for their group. Now, compare and contrast that to contemporary black politicians who say shit like this. Well, I'm just not gonna be no black vice president. I'm the president of the entire America. I'm not just president of you niggas. So here you are at a time in history. I just want to point that out because that's important to me. So all the people now who are in office and they have all these fucking excuses about why they can't come up with bills and proposals to help black folks out, it's a bunch of bullshit. Is what I'm trying to articulate here, man. Stop fucking capping. You could be doing more. You could be more radical. But a lot of these people have become career politicians And a lot of them, they basing their juice off of the civil rights movement itself. Oh, I was in the civil rights movement. Fuck all that. What you doing now, bro? And how can you compare and contrast your political career with that of the men of the past? And they were facing more hostility than you facing now. I just wanted to say that. Go ahead, bro.
Correct. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And then, you would have, and this is what I'm trying to say. So again, you would have, it wasn't all good. Just like what I said in the past, right? When you study American politics early in our history, again, you will see that within American politics, there are a lot of factions, right? And many of those factions would be influenced on their stance of slavery or about what to do, about what to do, with black people. Right. And so, so for a lot of us who say, okay, well, that's a long bygone era, and people don't think that way. Right. And so now, you're talking about, you would have Hiram Rhodes, then you would have PBS Pinchback in 1872. Right. Blanche Kelso Bruce, who took office, I think, from up until 1898 or so. And again, my fact checkers that are out there, you could help me out. But the thing about it is that, so the Democrats will come in 1890. And so you got to remember those Reconstruction amendments of 14, 15, 16, the things that makes us citizens, it gives us the right to vote, and everything else. Within those southern states where black people predominantly lived, you would have the Democratic Party, and again, and I say this as a conservative Republican, you got to remember at different times in history, we will be funneled into these political parties based upon what the environment was, at the time, right? So there's no one party that's a safe haven, again, above the other. So at this particular time, the abolitionists had gained a good foothold, in the Republican Party that were anti-slavery. So naturally, that's where black people would go, right? But if you want to fast forward in time, which is something I'll talk about later, is when you get into things like the New Deal and civil rights legislation and Eisenhower republicanism. So these are some of the factors that will come into play. Like I said, the New Deal, civil rights, Eisenhower republicanism. So these are the things that will kind of play into black people ultimately jumping ship and going into the Democratic Party, right? But we're not, again, we're not there yet. So at the end of the day, right, we're making moves based upon what the streets used to say when I was a kid, right? You got to get it how you live. Right? You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I'm saying? But the thing is, you know what I'm saying? But the thing is that what we have to, you know what I'm saying? What we have to remember is that, so you get to 1890 and the Democratic Party, again, so you got the rise of the Ku Klux Klan, and all of that stuff. And again, you would have factions of the Democratic Party who say that it doesn't exist or they would try to deny it. And all of this would have heavy influence in terms of black people being disenfranchised politically with whatever seats they had locally. And then also, within their own vote. So you wouldn't, so pretty much, after Blanche Kelso Bruce, you won't see another black senator until 1967. So that goes to show you that, that goes to show you the level of disenfranchisement, that we would, again, that we would end up facing, as black people. And so even in that time, right, you had Lincoln's vice president, Andrew Johnson, and Andrew Johnson was a Democrat, right? So in today's time, you wouldn't see a Republican and Democrat run together, but they ran under something called the National Union ticket. And again, that was kind of designed to kind of show the different factions in America, that we could all work together, hold the country together, etc. So that's it.
Let me interject a point here, because this will help contextualize what we get into in a minute. Specifically with Andrew Johnson, the key thing with him is he's from Tennessee. So that was a Confederate state. And it was such a big deal that he was opposed to the idea of the Union breaking up, that he was willing to betray the Confederate South. Now, I want to highlight this point of the duplicity that existed within the South at the moment. It manifests in a doctrine known as the 20 Negro Law. And what that meant later on, or what it really highlighted, was a deep-seated division that was already in the Southern culture, where you have the planter aristocracy class that was the major slave owners down there, and were the main ones that were running society with regards to that. So when you think high Southern hospitality and culture, they were the ones that were embodied by this ideology. Then you had the poor Southern worker. And I guess in today's term, there's a good book called White Trash that really describes this this dynamic very clearly and traces it all the way back to medieval Europe. But it was playing out in the South very clearly. And it's under this context where you get phrases of resentment like, what did they say? Rich man's war, poor man's fight. So the key thing about Andrew Johnson is he related to that working class, lower tier white society. And he was very anti-planter, but not anti-slavery. And specifically, he believed in white superiority and, more importantly, black inferiority, or Negro inferiority, as the term would have been. And these are terms and a theme that's going to continue to replay in the South. It's going to foreshadow why folks in the North end up giving up on Reconstruction and contextualize the political landscape with regards to the factions of non-Democrats that may have wanted to support the Republicans, followed by those who didn't support the North per se, but were far more worried about individuals of African descent ascending to power potentially.
The excuse always is like, I think, let me do some housekeeping before we move forward, man. I want to give a shout out to Machismo TV. Thank you for your donation. Adrian Thomas, thank you for your donation, sir. I appreciate that. And I got to go. Extended Clips, thank you for your donation, sir. I know I put your name on the screen, but I want to shout y'all out. And thank you, Vernon King, for your donation. War Child Games and Mr. Heat, of course, I've already been through from where Mr. Heat was, but I just want to put that out there. But getting back to the subject at hand, right? Black folks had an opportunity. America had an opportunity to let bygones be bygones and to say, okay, look, we fucked y'all over. Let's start all over right now. Let's start over. So you got like black people, like, you know how in a politically charged climate like this, you got black men actually being elected to senator, governor, representatives. It's almost unheard of. It's like, how? How could this possibly be? I know white people were shocked, okay? But that was the juncture. You know, here's my summarization of this shit. And I know you're going to cover it, and I know, you know, it'll all come to a head, and I think ultimately in pushing this point. This was an era in American history that all of the racism nonsense that we're going through now could have been nipped in the bud, right? And women could have been appeased, basically, by white men saying, look, here's how our system is run. We're going to allow you to franchise as well, but we can't operate the way that we used to operate. We got to change the way we do shit. They had an opportunity to do it. So after the North won the Civil War, Reconstruction began, and black men were able to vote and hold public offices. And they seemed to be actually doing rather well. Just 12 years later, though, the North decided to reconcile with the South. So they pulled out their troops, and it was then the Southerners picked up their racist bullshit and practices and habits all over again. They created the black codes. Then you get Jim Crow segregation. You could have had reparations. You wouldn't even probably needed to have fucking reparations if you would have just shut the shit down right then and there.
Yep.
Correct.
Bottom line, we wouldn't even be talking about none of this racial shit. And like Sandog said, we could have been like, this is ancient history. We could have been done with this shit. It could have been over with. Okay? Bam, right then and there. People could have gone about their business about being decent. If you wanted to self-segregate, you could have or whatever. But no, white people had to show their asses and had to terrorize black people with violence. And this is where we come to the whole point of the Klan. And the attitude of people, not just in the South, but in the North as well. Because many of these Northerners, even though they, didn't like slavery as a legal institution, there were economic reasons for it. It wasn't that they just loved black people to death. I mean, it's just the truth. So all of this shit could have been nipped in the bud, could have been a donezo with it. But let's go into the minutia of all that and explain how it all transpired. I ain't mean to fuck you up, Dogg.
No, team. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm getting at, right? So now, kind of like, just a real brief recap of states' rights. So, again, so now you're talking about, you got a dope super chat there.
Yeah, shout out to MLR, dog. Shout out.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, shout out to MLR, man. Thank you. But you know what I'm saying? But the thing is that now, so, Robert E. Lee and many Southern gentlemen and Northerners, be they Democrat or Republican, feel, again, back to states' rights, right? And this is what will more than likely influence the fact that black people put more weight on federal government elections than they do state and local elections, and for this reason and this reason alone. So now when you get into the first version of Reconstruction of, will handle it for themselves, you end up with the Memphis riots, and then also the riots that took place in New Orleans, right? And so when you look at, what took place in New Orleans, they're trying to enact the black codes. They're trying to enact the black codes there. The black people aren't having it. And so even then, like, you have a parish that's predominantly Republican, right? And then the white people there, they get violent, man. They get so violent, man, where you end up killing just about 2,000 people, right? And as a result of that, it's a presidential election. I'm sorry, it's a presidential election that they did. I think it's in the early, the date will come back to me, but they killed just about 2,000 people. And so, again, the Southern votes, or the white votes that he gets there, come in a landslide, and the Republican votes are damn near, are damn near non-existent, right? And so again, like, this is when you look at what Hiram was talking about and what other black leaders were talking about at that particular time, right? The message for it was mostly the message of African Americans that was like, hey, let's get on with it, and let this be water under the bridge. But as you can see so far, it's the other side that did it. And so when you get to William F. Butler, right, who was a member of the Negro Republican Party, after the Civil War. So he, in Louisville, Kentucky, 1867, he said this. He said, "We claim a position of political equality with whites as a matter of right, as a matter of justice." At the first convention of the Negro Republican Party held in Lexington, Kentucky, right? And he says, first we had the cartridge box, which is the rifle. Now we want the ballot box. And soon we will get the jury box, right? So, and then, and this is what I'm trying to say. So at the end of the day, man, it wasn't, it wasn't our intent, right? And then, he goes on to say, we went out and fought the battles of our country and gained our liberties, but we were left without the means of protecting ourselves and the employment of that liberty. We need and must have the ballot box for that purpose, right? And so, so in a sense, right, this is a prequel to the Ballad of the Bullet. Right, for Malcolm X, that will probably come, just about, 100 years later. So that will be the prequel or taste, of the Ballad of the Bullet. And so again, going back into the theme of the show, man, what I'm trying to do to the best of my ability, with the help of Nameless and Green Gorilla, because again, the way my mind works is that I think of several concepts at once and I try to articulate them all simultaneously, right? And so, thank you, my brothers here, for helping me out. But, I hope for you guys that are out there that this paints a picture for you that, again, it wasn't all good. Going back to what the title of the show is, it's not us, it's them. They can't let it go, right? Because I'm giving you examples. I'm giving you examples of Black men. I'm talking directly after slavery, where all they want is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? So the general rhetoric isn't, hey, let's go back and return the favor, right? And so, again, all of that sweet money that the planter class and that the Southerners were making, at our expense, right? So basically, our position in society and whatever level of gain or the level of gain that they were getting out of it, again, they're the ones that can't, they're the ones that can't move past it, right? And so now, you get into 1865, right? Pulaski, Tennessee, 6 Confederate veterans get together, and voila, right? You get the Ku Klux Klan.
And then not only that, in order to, basically maintain the vestiges of the slave trade, they instituted sharecropping.
Correct.
So, I mean, it's just slavery by a different kind of pretense. Okay?
Yeah, because the thing with sharecropping was, again, there was a lien on it, right? So a lot of the Black people didn't have money, like, to finance their labor, and all this stuff and everything else. So ultimately, it was just, it was just a trap, kind of like, again, back into slavery. So for the most part, you were kept in debt, and all the work that you were doing was, quote and unquote, to pay off your debts, right? And it was just an endless cycle of debt, which technically was a trick bag way of making you a slave again.
And then on top of that, they absolutely had to continue that, because number one, that's part of how they got a little bit of leniency from Johnson. If they were willing to help ratify the 13th, 14th Amendments, then they were allowed admittance back into the Union as a state level. But then the planter class in particular was targeted by Johnson to say, look, Marshall had those special orders and gave property back to Black folks down there. If you want it back, you need to come up here to DC, publicly apologize, announce that you lost, and I'll give you your property back. So by the time these folks get back down into the South, they see a bunch of Black folks there. They need to get that money going again, because again, cotton's running their economy. So that became a good hustle for them to sit down and, quote, negotiate terms. And that's how the majority of Black folks down there did get hustled. But you had folks like Tunis Campbell that pushed back against that and started forming labor unions. And this is where we get a recurring theme. Sandog, whenever you're ready for me to jump into that, I can get into this whole concept of fear of Negro rule. But I think you were saying something, Green Gorilla. Go ahead.
I wasn't going to say very much. All I'm going to say is this. Being a sharecropper, post-bellum South, which bellum is just a Latin word for war, okay? So post, after the Civil War, it's like signing a 360 deal, a rapper signing a 360 deal to a fucking record label. You're not going to be able to pay anybody back because you're not going to be able to generate enough revenue to pay back on the initial investment, because you're not able to get enough of a chunk of your own money in order to pay it back. So you trying to pay back your money with royalties while they already getting their money back, hand over fist, while you still got to pay them back. They not taking the shit out of the principal. They taking the shit out of your pot to pay them back. That's bullshit. So that's how we got mired back into the labor exploitation. Okay? That's how we got stuck back into it. And eventually this would lead to Black people saying, fuck the South. It's time for me to move to the Midwest and the North and, the West in order to try to escape this backward ass system that they got going here. But it was an opportunity for white people to say, okay, fuck it. We're going to let bygones be bygones and be done with this shit once and for all and get about the business of living up to our principles. But they decided not to do that shit. Okay? And it's white men and white women together that are responsible for this shit. So I don't leave white women out of this. Okay? Now, black men fight in wars. So all this shit about, like, you got these microwave, YouTubers and shit that's always got something to say about black men being fucking conquered and shit like this. We won the fucking war. We were a decisive factor in winning the fucking Civil War. The benefit, the spoils go to the victors, right? Supposedly. Didn't go to us. Because these white motherfuckers basically turned their back on us, bro. Okay? It is what it is. The very same white people that were supposed to look out for us for having won and to basically shift the balance of power in their favor, they just shit on us. They was like, fuck it. And they still doing the same thing now in politics, bruh. That's the problem I have with the Democrats. They doing the same shit that these motherfuckers did back when the war was won, like the Republicans did when the war was won. Okay? They like, okay, fuck it. You gonna give me what I want anyway. We already got what we needed out of you. Fuck you. And that's problematic to me. It's just problematic, man. Nobody's looking out for our interests. But to say we just sat down and didn't do a damn thing, that's a lie. That's why we gotta change. That's why we have to change the narrative. Because it's a lot of black people, even in the manosphere, black manosphere, who will sit back and say niggas ain't did enough. They ain't doing shit. They just, they just were conquered and shit. Just like these trash ass YouTubers and shit and Facebookists, whatever you want to call them. I don't know what they call them on Facebook. But that niggas ain't never did nothing. They was just conquered and lazy and ain't never stepped up to the plate. But you try being outnumbered like fucking, what's the population? Like down there 9-1, and they got all the guns and shit, and they got all the resources, and they have the organizational structure of government and military and police on their side. And you telling us, go grab a rock and shit and make it happen. Then we'll respect you. So that's the woman conversation. But some of these divestors and shit like that, the shit they'll say. Not even knowing that their own emancipation was contingent upon the actions of black men prior. No fucking honor, no respect. This is one of the things that really it kills me about the black community, man. Like if you go in the South, now these motherfuckers lost the war, did they not? Did the Confederacy lose or not?
No, they won because they get to be the ones that actually determine how that played out. But they won
in a certain. Well, they lost the war in a literally.
You're right.
Okay,
I was being saying that.
But after the Great Reconciliation, they were able to maintain the vestiges of their former life under a different. But they were monitored more closely. The federal government became a more centralized power after the Civil War. I think we can all agree with that.
Yep, okay? Because it is.
Yes. That's a fact. Okay. However, how many monuments do you see of people like PBS Pinchback any fucking where?
Nowhere.
Or Blanche Kelsel or William F. Buckley or Butler? Where the fuck do you see them at? You don't see them nowhere. Or Blanche Bruce. You know what I'm saying? Like where the fuck do you see them at? Or Tunis Campbell?
Nowhere.
But you go to the South, you see fucking statue after statue of these white boys who fucking lost the war. And guess who was the ones that commissioned these goddamn statues? The building of them.
The daughters
It was
of the
white women that did it. White women did the shit, man. And now we got niggas in the 21st century saying that we conquered and we ain't never did shit. And part of the problem is, where are the statues for us? Where's the statue of motherfucking Tunis Campbell? Where is that, man? Where it's seen? There should be a shrine to people like these Negroes everywhere. Even though they not all holistically good. I mean, not to say, because and I think Butler was a slave owner, wasn't he? But
yeah.
But the point is, but the point is, where is the history and memory of these people? Why are they not to some degree lionized for what they did? We got all this energy to go out and buy a whole bunch of bullshit to look like we dripping or whatever they call that shit now. But we don't commission on the memory of our own historical struggles. And then we wonder why we fucked up going through the same circles again and again and again and again.
It was Bruce. Yeah, Blanche Bruce. His father was white and was a slave owner. Yeah.
But go ahead, man. Take over. I'm pissed about that. Like you got the Daughters of the Confederacy supporting their men, and what do we have?
Oh, what's her name?
And I ain't just, I'm not trying to denigrate the entirety of all black women. All I'm saying is, where the white divester women? You don't hear no shit like that. Where do you fucking hear white women say we divested from white men? In a wholesale fashion on social media and shit like that. Who does? What are Asian women saying? We don't fuck with no Asian men. You hear any Latino women on any of these fucking channels saying, "Oh, we don't fuck with no Latino men"? Where do you hear that shit? You don't hear it nowhere, bro. Now, the feminists, they challenge white men. And during the 60s and 70s, some of them created these fucking communist, communes and shit like that. But they changed that rhetoric, man. They done with that. And we still stuck in the shit the white people did in the 60s, bro. This is what we got. This fuels our political imagination contemporarily. It's ridiculous, man. We stuck in a time warp, and we don't even understand history.
Look, let me say this, GG. You got an interview right here. I'll link it with Nixon's senior advisor, and I just want to quote what he said while this interviewer is trying to do a report on his administration, and they're talking about the war on drugs. And again, this is 1968. This is going down. He says, I started to ask Ellerman a series of earnest, wonky questions that he impatiently waved away. Quote, you want to know what this is really about? He asked with the bluntness of a man who, after public disgrace, had a stretch in federal prison and had little left to protect. End quote, he says. The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. End quote. This is exactly what the 3K camp did in the South, what the White League did in the South, what the red shirts did in the South. These were all reactions to individuals that did not agree with white supremacy, period. Period. It's the same story. This was 1968, same thing going down in freaking 1868. Yes. We are in a time warp because we keep on doing the same things that put us in a position to get the same results.
Correct. And don't forget the Knights of the White Camellia.
Man,
look, I got some visuals for that ass. Hold on. Damn, fam.
Yeah,
I can share the screen. You know what I'm saying? So
I'll throw something in the back chat in just a moment. Where did my link go? Oh, I got it here.
But again, while he's doing that, right? You again, when the Ku Klux Klan first came about, right? What it's doing is that it's focusing on, people, black people, what they would call the Loyal League, right? And so, the Loyal League also were a group of men who wanted to push back against the Democrats who are anti-war and anti-black. And also, oddly enough, the Ku Klux Klan had beef with the Freedmen's Bureau, right? And the Freedmen's Bureau was something that was designed to help black refugees who were formerly slaves of the Civil War, right? Again, everything from food, clothing, shelter, education. And the funny part about it is that even the food that they had, like to feed hungry black people, they also fed I think about what, 5 million or so impoverished white people, again with the same food. So again, at the end of the day, despite everything that they've went through, it was never black people's aim. You know what I'm saying? As James Brown calls it, the big payback, right? It was never the aim to show up and do the mashed potatoes, where they were living, right? It was a thing of, look, I just want to move forward. I just want to, I just want to go ahead and I just want to get on with my life. But again, you will have they will be very instrumental in disenfranchising black people at that particular time who are primarily Republican. And again, so when you look at things like the black codes, one of the main things that will come out of the black codes is the fact that you didn't have the right to bear arms, as a black man, which is significant, right? Because now you can't protect yourself from the angry mobs, that will show up, based upon whatever newfound progress they perceived that you would have, and that they perceive that you would have. And so again, when you actually study this history, you're gonna see many of the reasons why we function the way that we do and why we have the political stances the way that we do. So again, right, if you take black people into modern times or to the war on drugs, right, we would get the mindset of, ooh, bad people have guns. We don't want to support the Second Amendment. But it goes back to what Green Gorilla said. But if we were to have invested in our history and learned about the many massacres and the long history of disenfranchisement, we might feel quite differently or the opposite of the way that we did probably during the war on drugs, about firearms previously. So
let me interject on this though. Let me just say this shit, right? This the thing that's fucking me up now about these new liberal lefty motherfuckers, right? Now, look, I understand that marginalization and recognition is important. These are issues that are important, right? But these people are quixotic, man. I mean, like, they are absolutely aloof as it pertains to the reality of the threat of violence from, like, foreign invaders and, just the overall threat that people can impose upon each other in general, but specifically about race. Like, them people back then wanted, like you said, they wanted guns. They didn't want to get rid of guns. Guns kill people basically by other people holding them and pointing them in the direction of people. Guns in and of themselves don't kill. People kill. Okay? Unless you're stupid and you shoot yourself, which happens on occasion, accidents happen. But, we wanted guns to protect ourselves from these crazy white motherfuckers. We wanted guns. Now everybody on the left is like, let's get rid of guns. There's no need for guns. Like, we can stop violence. There should be no violence in the world. You're never going to get rid of violence. It's always going to be here. It'll never, ever disappear. You see, are animals violent?
Very.
Are cats violent? Or dogs violent? Or snakes violent? Or insects, spiders, bees? Or fucking mammals like beavers and birds like hawks and shit? Are these motherfuckers violent? They have weapons in their biology, just basically encoded into their biology. A fucking bull has horns for a purpose. A shark has teeth for a fucking purpose, to defend itself. Because it's a cold ass world out here. So they imagine that they can just do away with all violence. But what they don't even do is look at the violence that some of the people that they say are exposed to it. They don't even talk about the violence that emanates from them. This is the shit that fucks me up. Like women don't engage in violence with each other, with children, arguably the weakest group of persons in existence. This shit, it just kills me, the shit that we accept and just accept in passing. Like we have no challenge to it whatsoever. Like just be quiet about it. Don't say anything about it. Like violence is always wrong and it's so dangerous. You can't get rid of danger. The world is innately dangerous. It's crazy to me, man, some of the shit that people are putting forth, man. Now, you know, you can say, well, nobody should have an assault weapon. It don't matter, man. If there were no weapons, like guns, human beings would still be killing each other with swords and shit.
Correct.
They'll be cutting each other. It just is what it is. I mean, you know, you can take the so-called, and even if swords were removed, like everybody got rid of, you know, swords and shit, motherfuckers will make something to kill that makes something else. The question is whether or not we're prepared. Like, you know, I had a conversation with my father. They got kind of heated because, you know, he doesn't believe like I believe that if there is something that's about to pop off, like if there ever was a fucking violent confrontation between whites and black folks or whatever the case may be, if it ever did happen, who's going to be the first line of defense? It ain't going to be a fucking 80-year-old. I'm sorry. It's not. I mean, even motherfuckers, like, take, for example, football or basketball. We talking about something martial, though, where actual physical prowess actually means something, okay? How old is the average fucking NBA player? How old is the average NFL player? By the time you in your mid-30s, it's a wrap for you, man. It's done. You're through. You can't compete with these young motherfuckers. But these older guys, man, got it in their head that they still got it. Like you don't have it, bro. You don't. What's the average age of a motherfucking troop in the military that goes off in war?
Less than 25. Man.
Yeah.
They not fucking 40, 50-year-olds, man. And they damn sure ain't 70, 80 years old, bro. They not. It's just the facts. So the only line of defense you're going to actually have is young people. People between the ages, what, 16 to 28, pushing late 20s. That's going to be your first line of defense. They're going to be the only people who actually going to have the energy to be out there actually defending anyone in any, you know, like reasonable capacity, just based on biology alone. And what's the first thing we call these motherfuckers? What's the first thing we talk about them as? Pookies, Ray Rays, and little bitch ass niggas. Our mentality, I'm telling you, our mentality is fucked up. And like, even like when you're in the military, when you reach a certain age, what's the general retirement age for the average person in the military, bro?
You're only getting 20 years out of that.
Yeah, like that.
So that's even earlier than private sector.
Yeah, somewhere in that 30. So if you come in as an enlisted man, like what, 17, 18 years old, and you do your 20 years, man, you're in your mid-30s when you're done.
But like, I mean, yeah, you got generals who are older, but they ain't like 90. The motherfuckers ain't that old either.
Yeah, but even for officers, right, it's not as rigorous as an enlisted man. So if you are an enlisted 19 Delta, which is a cavalry scout, which is what I had, and 19 kilos, which are tankers, right? Those guys will spend their whole career doing just that. For officers, after you finish the rank of captain, right, you go to staff. And unless you're SOCOM, you won't see soldiers again, man, until you become a lieutenant colonel, which will be, if you're cavalry, a squadron commander, or a tank battalion commander, if those still exist. Right, it's been a minute since I've been in, but nah, man, you go back and forth between like the desk and administrative life and the field life. But for enlisted soldiers, it's like you said, it's like being an athlete, man. That's what they do. That's what they do from the day they enlist all the way until they retire or get out.
But you know what's funny though? No disrespect, man, to the older men out here, black men, whatever. Okay? But the reality is a lot of old guys, man, don't even know how to hook the Wi-Fi up in their house. Like, war is technological now. Like, you know, like if there was to actually be some shit that jumped off between us and the government or whatever the fucking case may be, these older guys wouldn't even be prepared to fucking do a goddamn thing, man. They can't even hook the Wi-Fi up in their crib. We talking about even in the Middle East where you got these, you know, so-called terrorists, right? They're using technology to fight the war, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's rough technology, but they know that they know how to take a cell phone, split that motherfucker apart, and turn it to a bomb, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
These old cats don't even know how to fucking hook up, how to use the apps on their phone, bruh. I'm not trying to denigrate them. I'm just saying, man, they not being realistic.
Yeah.
They're not being realistic, bro. You know what I'm saying? So all I'm trying to do is to say we need to stop the internecine hatred that we have for each other and cut each other some slack. You was telling me we need to have more empathy for each other. You know, I'm the type to yell and cuss and fuss and to be actually brash and brutally honest. You know, like, come on, let's stop the cap. Let's not play around with fantasy.
Yeah.
You know, like let's not engage in fantastical dreams about what I can do. Like I'm not dead yet. There's a lot I can do. Like, come on, bro. If you over 50 years old, your ass should not be out there in the field, bro.
Well, they conflate possible and probable.
You should not be out in the field, man, holding the M16 or whatever they use now as a general weapon. You should not be out there trying to do nothing. You're gonna get crushed immediately.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And then the first thing we say as young black men, or you know, the younger generation, them niggas is some bitches, or you know, fuck them niggas. These niggas ain't got it together. They all you got. That's the niggas you call to say ain't shit. That's all you have.
Facts.
Unless you can, like, by fiat, like God, create a whole new group of niggas.
On their head. I don't know.
But how you gonna do that?
Work. They don't know.
You gonna get a passport and go fuck and have some more? Like millions of Negroes to educate?
Yeah.
Nah, I ain't dissing the passport bros. I mean, you know, they can do what they want. I mean, you know, I'm all for it. I'm all for a man being able to decide where he go and where he spread his seed. But like, just be realistic, man. So we got to get back to the shit though. But at the end of the day, these white boys could have just said, fuck it. You know what? We gonna go ahead and enfranchise these people. We already made our money off of them. The South eventually had to end up changing anyway.
Correct.
They had, because the economics of the world changed. You know, the situation economically changed, and they had to adapt anyway. So America, it might still have a lot of, you know, agricultural business going on to some degree or extent, but it ain't like it was. It ain't booming like it was during the Civil War.
Yeah.
It ain't that way no more. So all that shit was for something, you know, that was gonna change anyway. It was going to change anyway. So here we are. What? 150 some odd years away from where we were, and we still got the same racial hangups. And motherfuckers saying it's our fault.
GG, let me combo that.
Yeah.
Because I think this is a good point to really highlight this in. I'll put the link in the chat. Did you see it in the back chat? Link I put, the second one.
I did see it. You want me to pull it up?
Yeah, if you can.
Why don't you pull it up yourself? Picture. I can share what you try to share.
Okay, I'll try because I got a lot going on. Let me see. Share.
That way you can move to the parts of it where you figure everything is the most important.
Got you. No slides. Share screen. Share window. I'm gonna go with this right here. Okay, let's see if that works. All right. Do I need to expand that or?
Yeah, you probably need to expand it a little bit.
Did it get bigger?
It got smaller actually, but keep going up. Keep going big.
Let me see. I'll hit shift.
Now it's getting bigger.
Can y'all see that better?
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the main thing I want to highlight here. Take a look at what's going on in this picture. This is taken from Smithsonian Magazine right here, so you guys can get a clip of what's going down. Right there to the left, you see the White League. They are a group of individuals that were part of the Reconstruction era of individuals who wanted to take action against both the Union Army, individuals moving in from the North to, in their eyes, take advantage of the economically destitute in the South, particularly white folks. They call them carpetbaggers, and individuals that were already down there in the South that were siding with Black folks or were at least sympathetic to our efforts to gain some form of autonomy and participate in the system of the United States. And what's important about this is, and I really want to drive this point home, you need to look at what's actually said here. They're siding with the 3K camp, and their whole mantra on the top, as you can see, it is the Union as it was. Underneath that eagle, it says, this is a white man's government, followed by the lost cause. And what you need to know about that is the way Reconstruction was generally described by individuals in the South is calling it the lost cause. And their idea, their theme that continues to run with regards to that is this concept that Black folks, if put in a position of power and authority, would not only demonstrate, quote, incompetence and the inability to actually run and govern, but that they were somehow going to get revenge on white people, which never happened. There's not a single instance we can find. And if there is an instance of Black folks retaliating with armed struggle, it's because they're responding to something that happened first, generally in self-defense.
Yeah, shout out to Blount County, Alabama, right? Because the Union veterans there, they had the anti-Ku Klux, right? And so again, so these were Black men with guns, right, who were like, and they told the Klan, if you don't stop beating up on Black people, you know, our property, you know, and Unionists, we got something for you.
But wait, let me get to this picture on the shield. That's the important part. Number one, I don't think it's a coincidence with the skull and bones right there. I'll leave that to my conspiracy theory folks to put two and two together. But it says worse than slavery. And you see a Black man, Black woman, and child. Child looks like the child's probably not even alive. You see some blood stains on the ground right there in front of it with a freaking book. And in the background, the sign says schoolhouse. Now, I want you to understand a theme that we got going on. And if you fast forward to a lot of instances of what you saw in the past, or I'm sorry, in the last 10 years, there's a particular individual that got taken to Burger King after he, showed up at an area that, we congregated and tried to show some sort of sympathy because it was in the churches that a lot of our schools actually started during this time period. So it's not an unusual instance where these locations get targeted where we're at by these individuals with these beliefs. But the thing to understand and take away from this, and why I wanted to link this particular article and give you this image so you can see the two forms of communication going on in cooperation. One stands for the overt, one stands for the covert. Martial arts, we call that the omoto and the ura, the outer gate and the inner gate. That's why they call themselves the invisible empire. But getting to that, the whole reason why they were able to subvert and utilize states' rights to undermine all of the efforts that were put forward with the 13th Amendment and later on the 14th and 15th Amendment to ensure that Black folks could still get things done. The actual freaking Department of Justice was created, and their whole purpose was to stop the Klan. I really want that to sink in. And you can stop sharing this screen here. That's fine. So we can go to something else. But I really want to highlight the fact that the Department of freaking Justice was created to make sure our rights actually got preserved. It wasn't some idea of, okay, we're just going to, maintain law and order. It was happening because Black people were getting killed, Black men in particular. A whole department of the federal government, every major law enforcement entity that's federally backed started because of us, in response to us. And we're going to have to hear this goofy language about how nobody needs any assistance and handouts, how you can bootstrap this crap. We didn't get anything done unless we had the assistance of the freaking National Guard and the U.S. damn military down there to make sure these things could go through. There's no other group of people that needed this much damn force just to get common sense things guaranteed that's written in that damn Constitution across. And if you understood how much of an unprecedented movement it was that we had not only the radical Republicans, but someone like that as Stevens in office that was overtly willing to low-key break the law to get these things written officially and to make sure that the Congress and the federal government had oversight to overreach past states' rights to make that happen. This sets up the entire conversation later on down the line as to why this idea of, quote, big government, some big enemy. If you didn't have government assistance, if you didn't have the federal government, more specifically and most importantly, to make sure that what you were entitled to as being a citizen born here was put into effect, we wouldn't have had nothing. Nobody would have anything. And you damn sure wouldn't have these folks moving in from overseas coming in, taking advantage of this moniker of American. Because I make the argument they're still figuring out what the hell that word means. When you compare us to every other group of people, and this is why I made that argument last time, we are the only modern economy on earth, modern nation on earth, that before it was a nation, it was a federal corporation. It was a federal corporation that became a nation. Everybody else was the inverse. They were a nation that became a corporate entity that could compete in the first world by way of industrialism, first wave.
Correct. And then again, to your point, though, shout out to the civil rights legislation of 1871, right, which was the anti-Ku Klux Klan bill. Again, just you know what I'm saying? Again,
specifically
just to build on your point. And so this is what we're trying to say. So when you look at the Reconstruction amendments, 13, 14, 15. And so again, and this bill now is designed to protect your 14th Amendment right, which is what makes you a citizen. Because at that particular time, what Nameless is saying, the people in the South were trying to take away our rights as citizens. So what they've been trying to do since Reconstruction really was to roll back the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment any way possible that they can do it.
Exactly.
But see, they have, these people have a variety of different tactics and strategies that they utilize. Right. So if they can't legally take you out of citizenship, by like just denying that you have, the right altogether, they'll impose some kind of law that basically relegates you to third-class citizenship.
Yep.
Like they'll create, like Nixon. Oh, fuck it, let's just create all these drug laws and shit. Let's create, different kinds of laws which basically take them out of the American loop. Let's take away their right to vote through alternative means, or take away, their ability to have, the ability to get employment or housing in another kind of way. If we can't do it directly, we'll do it indirectly.
Correct. Yeah.
And we sitting around scratching our heads, calling niggas Pookies and Ray Rays and shit. But this is what we do. Look, I don't get it. I don't understand. Hey, bro, I don't understand it. I know niggas is tired of being at the lower end of the totem pole, but how the fuck you gonna get to the top If you don't have history under your belt, you just dumb as a motherfucker and don't understand the game that's being played, like, especially when it comes to drugs. This one thing I want people to understand. Like, a long time ago, there was a series of articles put out, man, that demonstrated white people use drugs more than black folks do, bro.
Yeah.
This is a fact. I don't give a fuck if it's in Harlem, Brooklyn, Queens, LA. White people do drugs more than black people do, bro. And they do harder drugs than black people do. Always have. Always have. And they deal drugs more than black folks do. Because if they doing them, how many black folks, man, sell drugs to white people, bro? Let's just be honest about this shit. How many motherfuckers is selling like all weight to white boys?
Not many.
I ain't gonna say it don't ever happen. I've seen it happen. You know what I'm saying?
I'm just saying again.
I'm just saying the vast majority of white people are not copping their drugs from Negroes.
Right.
They buying them from each other. But let me show you this shit. I can show you better than I can tell. You know the excuse white people made for how black people got arrested more for this shit? You know what they said?
What did they say?
Because black people deal drugs outdoors while white people deal the drugs indoors.
You know what, Gigi? In the future, I'm doing my homework for it now. And Nameless, if you're around, God willing, please come in for the show, because I'm putting together to talk about like the science is built around racism, right? So like, again, how you get to drapetomania, right? Like, again, if a slave consistently wanted to run away.
You covering scientific racism?
Yeah, man, scientific racism.
Okay,
yeah.
I'm with you. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'll shut up, Gigi.
No, but the whole point is, white folks deal and sell drugs more than blacks, but they never accounted for all of the drug offenders being siphoned off to prisons. Now, did they?
Nope.
But niggas keep talking about the drugs and how fucked up the crack was. The crack didn't destroy us. Black folks always been on substances, man. I mean, it's a fact.
Yeah.
They always been on cocaine. Cocaine used to be the active ingredient in Coca-Cola.
Facts.
You always had motherfuckers talking about sipping tinctures and sipping codeine and shit. Niggas been sipping codeine since the shit been out if they could get it. Yeah. I mean, I'm just saying, white folks too. So all this shit about drugs is like, it just decimated the community. What decimated the community was all this goddamn policing, the deindustrialization, and the outsourcing of jobs.
Facts.
Then you got black folks. Black folks lived in the projects, right? Which were basically hand-me-downs from white folks, because initially the persons who preoccupied housing projects was white folks. Supposed to be a temporary solution, right? So eventually what the government did was they said, fuck it, we're going to subsidize white wealth and create these loans for these white people to get and move them out to the suburbs. But we're going to let the niggas stay around in these rat-infested projects that we're not going to invest in anymore.
Shout out to the Mouse Utopia.
Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, we say, it's our problem. Like, we did this shit. We could have cleaned it up. Okay, bro. Okay. Like, like Negroes gotta, like, we supposed to do everything like this. Like, this isn't, the conditions don't give rise to the kind of pathology you see. And that this ain't, like, this is not intentional. This shit is intentional. Like in Harlem, motherfucker was doing heroin and the shit in the 30s, man. They been doing that shit. Black folk been doing drugs, bro.
Correct.
Now all of a sudden the drugs just destroy everything. Like, we talking about the time of the Harlem Renaissance. Heroin was everywhere. I ain't gonna say it didn't fuck people up, but let's just be honest. But what niggas do is they find a way to blame themselves for everything. That's the only thing they know how to do. Because all they know how to do is imitate and ape and Xerox what white people say.
More specifically, white supremacists. And I want to draw that point. Gigi, let me get into this white Declaration of Independence.
Shout out to TD, man. I don't see him very often, man. Shout out to TD Hip Hop Media, man. Shout out to him, bro.
Yeah, shout out to that fam.
Yo, peace, TD.
Because I think this embodies a lot of what we're talking about ultimately, because we're just seeing the rhetoric being copy and paste and repeated in the present moment over and over and over again. I won't read the whole thing, but I want to go over the first couple paragraphs here. It won't take long, but I think they drive the point home, and this is going to sound familiar to you. We'll start off here. Believing that the Constitution of the United States contemplated a government to be carried on by enlightened people, believing that its farmers or its framers did not anticipate the enfranchisement of an ignorant population of African origin, and believing that the men of the North North Carolina who joined in forming the Union did not contemplate for their descendants to be subjection to an inferior race. Back again to this idea. This theme is fear of Negro rule. And that was the term they used. And you can insert whatever verb or adjective you want to describe. They continue to push this idea. Let's get this next line. We, the undersigned citizens of the city of Wilmington and County and New Hanover, do hereby declare that we will no longer be ruled and will never again be ruled by men of African origin. This condition we have in part endured because we felt the consequences of the War of Secession were such to deprive us of fair consideration of many of our countrymen. We believe that more after 30 years, this is no longer the case. The stand we now pledge ourselves is forced upon us suddenly by a crisis, and our eyes are open to the fact that we must act now and leave our descendants to a fate too gloomy to be borne. While we recognize the authority of the United States and will yield to, if exerted, we will not for a moment believe that it's the purpose of more than 60 million of our own race to subject us permanently to a fate to which no Anglo-Saxon has ever been forced to submit. We therefore, they list a list of common ideologies, but everything listed here, everything they're talking about speaks very clearly to the fact that these individuals have dominated this mindset. This was written in 1898. And at this point, it's the heart of Jim Crow. And at this point, in a lot of areas in the South, you did have some very powerful economic powerhouses that were predominantly run by Black America. And there were other groups of individuals that didn't necessarily side with the Democratic Party at the time. You had one popular organization or party, I think they were named the Populist Party. They were essentially what you would call and what would be referred to later on in the Southern strategy as just poor Southern whites. And more specifically, individuals that didn't co-sign on the idea of white supremacy. They didn't have enough power politically to actually compete with the Democrats and Republicans. But what ended up happening is they sided with the Republican side. And through siding with the Republicans, predominantly the Black Republicans, they were able to defeat the Democrats. And in response, they began ramping up these ideas of white supremacy and create a doctrine of white supremacy that's animated by these ideas here. I already sent a link in the chat room. I'll send it again. You guys save this for your records. And what you can do is when you get time, just take a look at what you see with gentrification. Take a look at what you see with a lot of these political conversations. And I want to run you through just a really quick timeline. I'm trying to keep this 2 minutes so I can hand it back to Sandog. You start off with what we said earlier with the Whigs and the Democrats. And the Whigs, again, are the proto-Republicans. They split because they can't agree on what to do about slavery, because these states that are being made during 1840 on up are able to gain additional political power, which runs the risk of invalidating power in the North, because most of them gave up slavery during 1790 so they could actually employ their immigrant population that was coming over. As a result, this leads to the conflict. They eventually form the Republican Party, and they begin pushing back with that the campaign Lincoln had pushed forward. So come down to the end of the Civil War now, and the Republican Party is now full swing trying to rebuild and reunite the Union. We get all of this aggressive action from a Congress that's very centered around trying to support and unite the Union, but more specifically, not undo what the heck it just finished fighting for, which is have these states use states' rights and basically reenact slavery. That gets a pushback. However, in 1877, a bad depression hits, and people are getting tired of having to do fight after fight, legislation piece after legislative piece. And ultimately, they strike a backdoor deal, which allows for there to be a Republican president at the expense of the federal government pulling its troops out of the South and letting the South run itself as it wants to. This is the beginning of the Jim Crow era. And all through the Jim Crow era, we are getting absolutely obliterated. There's a side conversation to be had about feminism, because there's a low-key compromise taking place that begins to manifest itself by 1920 when we get the feminist suffrage movement, or women's suffrage, and there's a consensus to prefer to let women have some modality of power rather than let black men run free. That's the whole compromise. It's better to have women have a modicum of power than men, specifically black men. Fast forward now to the Great Depression. We've got a situation now where the government has to make a response to people losing their jobs and all of that. So they come up with the concept of providing government programs that are going to assist people. This is where we get the New Deal. Who was excluded from this? By and large, African Americans, almost unanimously. We didn't get access to that or any of the peripheral programs that move forward. This is the beginning of a shift to a certain degree of people kind of raising their eyebrow against the Republican Party if you're black, because it's the Republican Party that's pushing this idea of we don't want big government. And it comes to a head by the time we enter into the civil rights movement, where a lot of the individuals that were fighting to get access to New Deal programs become civil rights activists. And this is where we get the whole issue with Title VII. I won't get into that specific aspect, but in 1965, the big deal was the Republican Party did not support civil rights. It saw it as another move from big government. And this is where we get a lot of black folks then shifting, almost hard swapping to the Democratic Party. And this is how we get from Republicans being for black, basically for civil rights, since the original civil rights bill was created from that Republican Congress, and everything that makes America America comes out of the Republican end. And we make a slow but steady hard shift as civil rights becomes more of an issue that relates to addressing and, quote, interfering with states' rights. But the issue...
Go ahead. I want you to finish. Go ahead.
The last part is the issue ends up being the grand compromise, because of what we see with Title VII. Ends up being that even when we were at the 11th hour of getting this legislation pushed, which would prevent Jim Crow laws from being possible by making proper amendments to the Civil Rights Code so that race and color could be protected, there was an argument in Congress that stated if this went down, that black women in particular would have an advantage over white women, because black women would be able to make the claim against businesses not hiring them by virtue of them being black, and white women couldn't. So at the 11th hour, they bring this argument up in Congress, and they eventually said, no, we don't want to pass this because it's going to endanger the bill. They kept pushing. Again, last minute, they finally decided to let it go, and then they included gender in there. And so because white women were worried that black women would have an advantage, this gets put into the Civil Rights Code, and everything we see now, where being female now counts as being a minority and entitles you to all of this legislation that stemmed out of the New Deal, white women now can numerically engage in provisions and protections that were supposed to be allotted to black people and black men in particular, which is where we get intersectional feminism. It's where the feminist movement ends up usurping black power as an ideology and as a movement, and how we get literally stuck, politically orphaned and homeless as black men, because we can't take advantage or initiate any of this nonsense. And when we raise a voice against it, we get hit with the same arguments we're hearing in this white Declaration of Independence and all of the nonsense that's been said during the freaking Jim Crow era. It is absolute BS.
Boy, you dropped the bomb right there. Because I'm going to tell you. I already counted how Howard Smith, I forget what state he's from, but Howard Smith was the Democrat who did it. He introduced sex into Title VII, which was basically meant for black people as a whole. He introduced sex there, and now everything you see is nothing more than people trying to cash in as much as they possibly can. I talked to Dr. Johnson the other day, and I basically said, it's like taking a wet towel and trying to wring every ounce of moisture in that motherfucker out. I'm gonna get as much as I can get while the getting is good. But all the while, black men ain't getting shit out of none of this. We're getting nothing from any of it. Absolutely fucking zero. So when you see a woman, like BGS did a video on it where he talked about how there was a black woman. I can't remember the black lady's name, but she was having a conversation with Roland Martin and a few other black men about how black men need to get in line and, don't vote for the oppressor. Like as if voting for Republicans is somehow going to take away, something from them. Because that's ultimately what it actually is. Black women don't want the gravy train from Title VII to run out for them. But it ain't working for us.
At all.
It don't do shit for us. It does absolutely fucking nothing for us. So while you consider yourself to be magical, niggas done fought and died for this shit. And these same motherfuckers, man, I really don't want to use the bitch word, but I'm about to use it. These same bitches who declare themselves to be magical are benefiting from shit. I ain't gonna say it was just black men, it was black women too, who, doing the civil rights, but I'm talking about especially doing wars, especially during the era of Reconstruction. You are basically taking the benefit from what black men and black people as a whole put their effort and energy into, and then you basically turning around and saying that everything about black men is what white women say it is. Everything they say about us, you fucking fully agree with. Everything that comes out of these motherfuckers' mouths is everything you repeat. All the while, they got shrines and shit dedicated to they men. Even the men who fought for our freedom, we don't even know who the fuck they are. Nobody knows who Pinchback is. Nobody knows who the fuck Blanche is. Blanche Bruce is. Nobody knows who William F. Butler is. Nobody knows who the fuck Tunis Campbell is. It's like, how many motherfucking black senators or black people in government can you name from the era of Reconstruction?
How many people know there even were any?
Facts.
And these are men who fought in wars, who had their own militias, to protect themselves against, basically violent ass terroristic white folks. Who actually won they were the decisive factor in winning the Civil War. Then the federal government turns its backs on black people in order to basically bring about the Great Reconciliation with the South, and then here we get thrown back into Jim Crow. Then we fight for civil rights, then they give it to white women who wanted it all along. And think about the suffragette movement and the shit that these white women said. They was like, well, if we can't get it, you shouldn't want it as well. That's what they said. And Felicia Gray, do we have land? We got colleges, don't we? We got fucking HBCUs. I don't see the shit there.
But you know what they're trying to put up, though? They'll put an Ida B. Wells. They'll put up a Sojourner Truth.
We got HBCUs. Historically black colleges and fucking universities. It should be at every goddamn one of them. Shrines edified to these dudes. All throughout every last one of these motherfucking campuses in the country. Where every black student that attends gets to see the history up close and up personal. And every black person ain't broke. Black people ain't always been broke. Even during slavery, Jim Crow. Everybody black ain't been fucking destitute. So at the end of the day, that's an excuse to me. And the women are the ones went out going from place to place, house to house, organization to organization. They were the ones, white Southern women were the ones who put them who basically went and subsidized all them goddamn monuments to white dudes. Who basically wanted to have their secret empire, the KKK. And they made all these arguments about the backwardness of black men. Just go back and listen to what Elizabeth Cady Stanton and them said. If we can't have it, they shouldn't want it either. But it didn't stop them motherfuckers from getting it in 1920. Did they say, oh, we're not gonna have it unless black men get it? Did they say that shit? When have you ever known a woman to say, well, if my man can't have it, I don't want it? Name one. Name one. But they demanded it of us. Oh, you shouldn't want it if we don't have it. Then we get to the civil rights movement. The shit is supposed to be for us. US, B1, ADOS, supposed to be for us. Now white women are declared a minority. And everybody's trying to wring the water out of the towel as long as the towel got water in it. And then you ask why black men pissed off. Then you tell us to fall in line. Oh, you need to fall in line. You aiding the enemy. You know what I like in this shit too? This is what I said a long time ago. I said, imagine this, right? Just imagine it. Being on a team, but you on the team and you jealous of the star player. You mad that he got a shoe deal and the MVP award, but you ain't got one. You mad that he starts, but you come off the bench to play a supporting role. So fuck it. You're going to throw the game out of spite. Not only that, you're going to give the other team the playbook. Then you start bitching about your teammate to the press. Then you start slipping Mickeys in your teammate's drink so that he don't perform well. What fucking part of the game is that? That's the shit we're experiencing. And we trying to tell you we're experiencing the shit. But instead, you're trying to flip the script and say, we don't want you to be shit. That's not the case, man. Black men have never said, we don't want women to be able to vote. When have you ever heard any black politician throughout the annals of black history say that shit?
Never.
When have you heard it? When you heard black men say we're magical during Reconstruction, we're magical. When have you heard the shit? You don't fucking hear it. When do you say, oh, well, as a woman, you got to be on your own. You got to get your shit together. Stop worrying about what we doing. You got to worry about yourself. When you heard her say that? This is a team sport. Everybody else playing team ball, except for us. Everybody's playing fucking team ball. Except for us. And then we bring it to people's attention. The first thing that happens to us is, what?
Why y'all complaining? This is an excuse.
You're not masculine. You're not masculine. You're not masculine. You're not a man. You ain't no real man. Then you got these hoe ass niggas coming out the woodwork. The first thing they say is, well, you know, I love my mama. I love my sister. I love my wife. Man, look, God bless your wife, man. I don't want no harm to come to her. None of that. But nigga, I don't really give a fuck about your wife. I don't know her. Nor your mother. Personally, if I don't know her, now I'll show her the general, you know, respect you're supposed to show anybody. But like for me to have some dying loyalty to your mother? For what? No, would I do the same for your father? I love my mother. I saw her take her last breath. Anything she wanted, I waited on her hand and foot. And that's on her grave, I can say that. I know I did that with the full support and endorsement of whatever deities may exist. I know I did that shit. So and you can't tell me about my respect for womanhood. Because a lot of motherfuckers, a lot of you niggas will take your parents and put them in an old folks home and keep going on about your motherfucking business while you're spending all that goddamn money.
Facts.
So don't sit there and talk to me about venerating womanhood and all this shit. I venerated my mother to the highest. I got a goddamn, I ain't gonna say it's a goddamn, but I got a fucking goddamn funeral urn right now in my house. It ain't in some goddamn mausoleum somewhere, some fucking cemetery somewhere. Those are the facts. I done seen kids, man, take their parents and stick them off somewhere and don't go see them at all. But they ready to call the fucking insurance company when the motherfucking dead. Mamas and daddies. But at the end of the day, just because you love your wife or your mama or you love your daddy don't mean I'm bound to respect them and love them like you do. You only get one mother. You only get one father. But this shit right here is juvenile, man. We can't even tell the truth. In fact, our ideology, whatever white people arguing about at the time, becomes our ideology. That's the facts. Whatever they talking about is what we talking about. Whatever's on the table for them is what's on the table for us. Whatever's in their interest, we find a way to make it our interest without developing an interest of our own, without developing an agenda that works for us. We have no agenda. The only agenda we got is the agenda they make up for us. Then we try as best we can to, at an abstract level, make sense of what the fuck they saying so we sound like we actually know something. How the fuck does that work for us? I was on like Marcus, I was on Keep It 100's channel, right? And it's a whole bunch of cats, man, who are Republican conservative. Okay? Now, I'm an independent, man. I think how I want to think politically. Okay? I don't declare myself to be a member of any goddamn party. But don't use abstraction like states' rights, cut taxes, forced busing. Don't use them. Don't use dog whistle politics to try to fucking convince me that the Democrats is fucked up. I already know the Democrats fucked up. I know they fucked up. But don't say all of a sudden that, you know, well, the Republicans are much better. They for us. That's a fucking lie. Now, I can see if you vote for the Republicans because you're in a different tax bracket or they have different family values. If it works for you, it works for you. But don't try to convince me that they love us. You just got evidence. I mean, even if you give these Negroes evidence, they don't give a fuck about it, though. They don't care. The point is, what's on our agenda? What works for us? What is our agenda? I can tell you, though, the liberal agenda at the present moment does not work for black men. It's all Title VII, Title IX based. That's why it doesn't work for us. They're squeezing more out of a provision that was meant for us as a whole. White women are squeezing more out of it than any goddamn body. And this is the second wealthiest demographic in the fucking country.
But Gigi, they also numerically rank so much more than all of us combined. It doesn't even fundamentally, mathematically even make sense.
But see, this is why I hate, look, you motherfuckers need to read Tommy Curry and understand what he's just actually trying to say. He's basically saying, look, you think the first wave feminism was a real movement towards, balance and equality for women. They wasn't giving a fuck about none of that shit until black men was about to get the fucking vote and be ushered into, governance. Till they were about to take full participation in governance. Their asses didn't step up. And basically, we all want what you have. Then you get to the second wave, these conniving ass white women, the first thing they did was found a way to wiggle their way in to the fucking Civil Rights Act while their asses was out there talking about they don't want their kids bust. They don't want their kids to go to a school where they got niggas bust in. I can show you the pictures. They out there spitting on kids and shit, yelling. Now we send our kids to them motherfuckers to educators. And you wonder why these young kids are stupid and fucked up in the brain. Then we say, oh, well, we need an all-black school for males. Then you got all types of motherfuckers, white women from everywhere. We don't want that. That's unconstitutional. And they sitting there with their weird ass wearing men's clothes and shit. That's unconstitutional. Hey, man, look, bro, I'm done talking, man. Like, it's like, I just don't know what to say about it, man. I don't. I really don't. And the reality is, black men were systematically written out of the Civil Rights Act. That's just the facts, man.
Facts.
We were written out of the Civil Rights Act, bruh. And black women, to the extent to which they can claim that they're women, they're able to enjoy some modicum of inclusion in it. And they declare themselves to be magical. And we sitting here, and niggas don't even know how to even interpret it. They don't even know how to interpret the shit. If you bring it up, the first thing they'll say, oh, that's dangerous. You're dangerous. You're like Dylan Roof. You're going to start like your Nazi fascist group. You're grooming young men to hurt people. You bitch ass niggas will be the first niggas shining master shoes on the plantation. Straight up, I swear to God, man, these bitch ass niggas will be the first bitch ass niggas to shine master shoes at the goddamn plantation, bro. Real fucking talk, bro. They'll be the first niggas to tell. Dry snitching. The first niggas to go tell. Them niggas meeting somewhere and they making a lot of fuss. They say they gonna do X, Y, and Z. I'm scared. Master, the first niggas to do that shit. They put all the business on the street. Any fucking semblance of resistance. Now tell me, what about Robert F. Williams? What about Ida B. Wells saying black people should have a fucking gun? These are the same niggas, pro-black, right? Using all this shit based on Title VII. Title VII ain't gonna protect us, man, from an onslaught if one is coming. But a Winchester might.
Facts.
But, again, coming back to it, and this is what I want people to realize in terms of that they can't let it go, right? Because, again, one of the tactics of the Ku Klux Klan was to always, in a sense, to work in this decentralized uh, kind of way, right? Where, kind of like what you hear Hydra, with the Marvel films, cut off one head, another head grows to take its place. So even at the end of the first Ku Klux Klan, which kind of started in a sense to dissipate, it began to be seen as a public nuisance. You would have people who would wear the garb of the Klan to go out and, commit crimes and, all that other kind of stuff. Again, kind of, like, kind of in the sense of, it gave them carte blanche, to do whatever they wanted to do. And so, again, so when you get into the early 1870s, when the federal government begins to clamp down on it, many Southerners also, once they see that clamp down come, back to the point of you could have stomped this out a long time ago, they become reluctant to be affiliated with the Klan, out of the thoughts that, hey, this might bring the North, back down here. And so now, and I'll say this, and I'll be, because, again, I want to do this in a couple of parts. I want to do, They Can't Let It Go in a couple of parts. And actually, I would like to do it. I would like to call it that, pretty much, man. Maybe even for the remainder, like I'll see, maybe even for the remainder of the series. But when you look at the examples that we gave you, the Ku Klux Klan, and then you get to the kid that got shot up the church, and went to Burger King, or the shooter in Buffalo. All of this is correlated. It is ingrained in the culture, right? So the kid in Buffalo had a manifesto, right? The kid in South Carolina, again, he was following whatever he was following, and allegedly, they were seeking out to agitate people, in order to start a race war, because we're not going to quote and unquote, be replaced. And so sad and most unfortunately, they can't see that it's the powerful people above them that set policies, and not necessarily what you would call black people and immigrants, right? Because this is what happens with the second version of the Ku Klux Klan, right? And so Ku Klux Klan 2.0, what happens, right? You get that famous film, The Birth of a Nation, right? Which romanticizes the Ku Klux Klan. And now you get like a lot of the rhetoric. And again, right, because again, a lot of you know me. Y'all know that I come from, the Republican side of the House. And so the second version of the Klan is where you get the rhetoric of moral values, uh, you know, hard work, Protestant work ethic, because with the second version of the Klan, now again they have issues with black people, but then you're also starting to get immigrants that are coming in, right? So you're looking at the Roaring 20s. So you're getting people who are coming in that are Catholic, Catholic and other immigrants from Europe. So the idea is that somewhere between them and those Negroes, right? They're morally America is being dragged down. And tell me if those arguments don't sound familiar, right? And so as so what I would like to point out, like for my just anybody, man, no matter where you are in the sphere of American politics, again, we have been a political football, right? So whether if you turn back the hands of time, whether it's we're fighting over who do you want to support, the loyalists, the British loyalists, or the Continentals, right? The North or the South, red and blue, and at the end of the day, man, all these guys are playing for the same thing, but they just have different tactics, you know what I'm saying, of going about it, right? And so now, you know, the Klan becomes very popular because they're preaching this thing of, you know, the preservation of American values. We're pushing back, you know, against the face of evil, you know, which would be, you know, at this particular time, you know, black people, you know, and Catholic immigrants, you know, and all of this other type of stuff. And so, you know, again, it's, I just want you guys, because you know I'm not gonna, because it's time for me just about to go pray, but you know what I'm saying, I want you guys to understand that there's nothing new under the sun. And for the people who look to refute this, because you know a lot of you know, whatever sphere you are, wherever you sit politically, what you have to realize is, again, you know, shout out to, you know, DC, you know, from the code breakers, right? A lot of us, like I said, our circumstance is ultimately what funnels us into our political parties, our belief systems, and the decisions that we're going to make at the time. So just like what Nameless protagonist said, right? So for African Americans, you know, once you get to, and I said it before, once you get to Eisenhower Republicanism, which has an impact on the New Deal, which waters down civil rights legislation, right? Or the stance isn't hard enough, right? This is now the beginnings of black people now, you know, jumping ship, especially once Lyndon B. Johnson pushes through the civil rights legislation, or even before then, in regards to access to the boons of the New Deal that the immigrants were getting. And so the fact that they can't let it go. So even as we continue this, and you know, and we jump into Jim Crow, I want to talk about again, when you begin to build the infrastructure of America, how black people get dispossessed. You know, shout out to Highway I-95, right? How we get dispossessed, you know, when America starts to grow and to develop infrastructure, right? Shout out to Seneca Village or the Lanier Lake, you know, or Lanier Lake in Georgia. And so I want to, so in the future, when you talk about they can't let it go, and to understand why do we have crime today, why do we have poverty today, and how we are what we are. Again, all of this stuff, man, shapes your culture, right? So they say it takes 21 days to form a habit, right? So what happens when you live under a circumstance, right, for 300 years, 400 years or greater, right? And so when you look at a lot of our bad habits, you can't dismiss this stuff, man. So when you got guys talking about, yo, I'm gonna pipe you down and oh, listen, take your chick and, you know, yada, 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 again, that goes back to the plantation, because for us, that's how we were valued. When you became 15 years of age, right? They checked your muscle tone and all of that. They checked the size of your manhood. And, you know, if you were legit, you got to move on, right? And smash and reproduce. For the other guys, right? they were castrated or killed, you know what I'm saying? Or castrated and put back to work, right? So now you get to see how this dysfunction goes on. Or, you know, you go tell a 13-year-old girl who just had her period, hey, remember, she's 13, right? And you tell her, hey, if you give me 5 or 6 kids, I'm going to set you free, right? So you have to, so like, you know, again, once this is all over, you know what I'm saying, I want to do like a recap and to show how this has shaped how this has shaped our culture, and then some of these outcomes that we see in our community, because it's not that you're messed up or that you don't know how to act. Again, you know, and shout out to Rogue's son and some of the other brothers, you know, that I talk to, right? And you know, we talk about empathy, but again, we do understand the bigger picture of how we were funneled and made to be, like I said, and made to be what we are, right? And I know I kind of cut it short because the third iteration of the Ku Klux Klan, I want to keep them. I want to keep them there. So when I talk about Jim Crow, I could talk about the third iteration of the Ku Klux Klan, and then and like I said, and then show the moment in time in history where there was when people switch. So when black people leave the Republican Party and go Democrat, and then when a lot of the people who still have the planter class mentality, you know, how they leave the Democratic Party and end up, and end up on the Republican side of the House. But one of the things about they can't let it go is because in the next round of this, because in Jim Crow, so I want to talk the Great Migration. I want to talk the Great Migration, and I really want to dig into the disenfranchisement, you know, of our people and how significant that was, man. So, like, you know, if you get Brother Kabuki, right, who buys a house for, I don't know, 10 grand, and now today that house is worth 400 grand. But, you know, again, but because he's black, you know, we're going to put it on the market for 250. Well, that's theft, right? You just stole $150,000, right? Again, from the Kabuki family, and all of that stuff is still here, and it's very much, it's very much alive today. And, you know, one of the reasons why we have to galvanize and form our own political identity, because I just looked up and I just see how segregation has paved the way. Yeah, correct. And so, you know, I'm looking at it now. And so, and Gigi said it, Nameless said it, and I said it. And a lot of what you're facing in America now is America's inability to deal with black men in a fair and equitable status. So when you look at Pat Buchanan's The Suicide of a Superpower, what he's missing is that the immorality of backing the Southerners after Reconstruction is what ultimately broke the moral bond of the country. Because what you did was you chose the ability, ultimately you chose the ability to make money over the progress of the country, right? So you chose something that technically was a short-term hustle that that for the most part worked in this space in this period of time, and you tried to make it a complete way of life, or like I said, or to build empire on it. I don't know, for hundreds of years, thousands of years, or whatever the case might be. And so, again, man, for the brothers that's out there, man, all I'm saying, man, is, please, let us love each other, right? Again, because I think of many things at once, right? Look at what we've been through. Look at what we've been through in this country. And, even for me, like I said, I'm a Republican, been a Republican since the 90s. And, I hear like a lot of brothers talk about, some of the rhetoric that comes from some of the guys on YouTube. And if there's ever a panel, with these guys, as a longtime Republican, or a conservative myself, I would love to talk with them, because, again, fundamentally, the state and everything that we have in this country, for the most part, has been animated by race. That's why. So when you hear people on the right or whatever complain about identity politics, right? Because at the end of the day, they're repeating the rhetoric of the people that created identity politics, right? So again, this period of Reconstruction that we had actually was America's best, and I hope to God, not only, but it was really America's best chance to eradicate all the stuff that we see today.
And you know what's funny? You're right. When you said it to me, that's why I dropped the bomb. These people started identity politics. They're the authors of it. They're the creators of it. But if you don't identify with their identity politics, oh, well, all the wokeism, you the original woke motherfuckers. You white motherfucking dudes are the originators of all of the fuckery you deplore. You created all of it. You started this stupid shit. They started it.
Yeah.
They started, well, I identify as a white guy, and so I'm supreme. Y'all started it. You started it. Not only did you just start it, you institutionalized it. Now, and the reason I put this article up here, because people don't believe what I say. Bro, all I'm trying to say, and look, I don't have a problem with gay people being who they are and getting what they get. Go get what you get, be who you are. I don't give a fuck. I don't care where you put your penis. I don't care where you put your mouth next to an orifice. I really don't. But what I have a problem with is everybody using legislation which black men helped to push to forefront and have the rug pulled from underneath our feet. I don't like that, man. That's some bullshit to me. And then everybody denying that it's happening. Everybody acting as if, well, if you don't continue to allow benefits to matriculate to us, well, then you're a hater. Or, somehow you're working in the service of justice and you just want to be a white dude. Man, fuck you niggas for that bullshit. That's bullshit. I'm getting left out of the party. I gotta stand outside where everybody else eating and dancing and having a good ass fucking time, and I invested in the fucking party in the first place. I gotta stand outside while y'all niggas eating good and shucking and jiving and shit. Then you tell me to get in line. Get in line. I'm like, man, fuck you. I don't give a shit if you black, white, red, brown, purple, yellow, if you straight, gay, bi, trans, I don't give a fuck. You ain't gonna tell me I gotta stand outside of the party that I helped fucking fund. I put my sweat equity into making the party happen, but I gotta just stand outside. Be quiet. Get in line. Imagine the gall of that shit. And then to know the history behind it. The history. Look, the Supreme Court decided, blah, blah, blah. That's the prelude, right? An employer who fires an individual for being homosexual or transgender fires that person for traits or actions it would not have questioned in members of a different sex. Sex plays a necessary and undisguisable role in the decision, exactly what Title VII forbids. What's notable here is that the Civil Rights Act didn't initially include the prohibition of sex discrimination. It wasn't added to the bill until the final day of the debate by a segregationist congressman, a Democrat from Virginia by the name of Howard Smith. On the 8th day of debate in the House, Smith rose to argue in favor of including sex in the bill. According to a book by Gillian Thomas, Smith read a letter from a female constituent asking him to, quote, protect our spinster friends who are suffering from a shortage of eligible bachelors. Smith said, I read that letter just to illustrate that women have some real grievances and some real rights to be protected. I am serious about this thing. And he basically put the shit in there in order to kill it, because he didn't think it would go through. For one, that's what some people say. And then also there's another quote in another article I got where basically he said he didn't want this shit to interfere with the opportunities that white women were exposed to. Those are the facts. So everybody's using Title VII, which the initial thrust of was basically based on the sweat equity of black folks, particularly black men. Now everybody else, women, no matter what the fuck color they are, gay people and trans persons are able to fucking benefit from some shit that our ancestors fucking died for, got fucking humiliated for. And then they'll tell us to fall in line. Oh, you're just a patriarch. You're just a misogynist. Man, fuck you, is what I'm saying. Fuck your party. Fuck your benefits. I'm sitting out here outside of the party looking like Boo Boo the Fool. Why you telling me I gotta fall in line with this shit? I have to accept it. Otherwise, I'm immoral. Then you try to guilt me and shame me into not looking out for my goddamn self. It makes no sense to me, man. But then they'll call you everything under the book. The motherfucker, they'll call you every name in the book, throw you under the bus, tell you how regressive you are, tell you how fucked up you are, when everything they're doing, it just indicates that they're trying to do what's best for themselves. They don't give a fuck about you, but they want you to give a fuck about them. They want you to care about them while they tell you, go get your own. Fuck you. Every good deed reserves a motherfucking return deed. So if it's fuck me, it's fuck you. I don't care what your sex is. I don't care what your sexual orientation is. If it's fuck me, it's fuck you. Yeah, I love my mama, but I don't love yours. I respect her as a human being, but I don't have to look out for your fucking mama's interest. The fuck? Because you love her or whatever the case may be. I don't give a fuck. You don't care about me?
And this is
that
why
shit ain't. Yeah, go ahead. I'm done, bro.
It's fine, fam. I'll just close with this. This is why I keep saying over and over again, family. If you're black in this country, if you're part of the ADO social complex, foundational Black American, however you want to articulate it, if you are non-white, specifically, if you're part of that group, you are a prisoner of war. Politically, you are a prisoner of war, and in some instances, physically. Black women, you're classified as a concubine. The whole culture reflects that. Everything that is supposed to be in a position to participate in this idea of being a citizen, this is where you're at. This isn't some declaration of victimhood, because being a prisoner of war has status. All you owe those motherfuckers is your name, rank, and social security number, and keep it pushing. Because until you can operate as your own in-group and pry dead cold fingers, figuratively, from their grasp of that Title VII, you're not seeing a piece of it. And without something, some way to enforce the laws that are already in place, you don't get to participate in democracy. Democracy is nothing more than 49-51. You don't get to marry a party. Any aspect of political power we had was buried. It was marked dead on arrival with the Black Panther Party. You had a cultural opportunity with the nation. Nobody participated with it. You had an earlier movement at the height of this nonsense with Garveyism. They created a separate branch of government in the FBI known as COINTELPRO to snuff that out. And if you follow the breadcrumbs J. Edgar Hoover left, you're going to find a lot of familiar names. You are a prisoner of war. You have no friends. You have no allies. You have people who look like you. And we're the only group of people that can't even really trust our own women because we have to fight the power dynamic with regards to that.
Man, look, let me just say this in case motherfuckers think I'm hating on women or whatever the case may be. I don't mind women getting whatever they feel like they deserve or have coming to them. You want to be a motherfucking corporate boss bitch? Go ahead and do it. Be it. You want to be a black, fugly lesbian? Hey, man, it's all free, man. Free world. Go do what you want to do. I don't give a shit. But while you're doing that, don't throw me under the bus. While you're going out exploiting and wringing as much moisture as you can from the tile that's called Title VII, which is supposed to be working for all of us, don't throw us under the bus with this patriarchy bullshit. Stop it. Cut it out.
I won't finish the thought because this is critical here. And adding with what Gigi's saying, ultimately, you would have been good if it was left alone. If they left Title VII as it was, you being black would have had an advantage over other women that other women couldn't have claimed, which would have put us at the top. But more specifically, it would have put black men up there too, which is why I said in the very beginning, the issue, the concern was Negro rule. When folks were coming in, taking over in the South, doing everything they were doing, they weren't worried about women being in positions of power and authority. They were and have been always concerned with black men being in that position. Understand, it is Negro rule, Negro male rule they're concerned with. If you listen to the language, they will tell you themselves. When you listen to these ideas of black men actually building something, it requires Negro male authority, which means you need to have power. First law of thermodynamics, energy can't be created or destroyed, so it has to be reallocated from somewhere else. And we're the only group of people where the power has been lumped disproportionately on the side of women. So when they give you that goofy argument of power has to be taken, you know who you have to take it from. And now you know why it's so damn hard. Because just like Ice Cube showed you, we never saw ourselves as black men and black women. We saw ourselves as black people. We want to see us win as people. But it's never worked like that in this country. All we have is us right now. And if we're going to get in that position, you need to understand your position. We're showing you the law. We're showing you the things that were built. Something is just as good as not existing if you don't aware or understand that you're the one that built that. Other people have hijacked your work. If you want a recent illustration of that, go look at hip hop. At the end of the day, we are only going to get somewhere if we look out for our own interests, because it's only through that we can raise up the area around us. Think of it like a boat. The more mass you have, the more weight you have in that water, the more weight you create. And that's the way in which other people need to follow you, period. We can't depend on nobody else but ourselves, but don't think that we're here because we didn't do anything. Don't think that we're here because we didn't try. Don't think that we're here because we just given up. No. The rhetoric was twisted. The story was twisted.
You're right about that. And look, all I can say is, look, I can understand some women claiming that they've been left out. But white women as a mass, as a whole, especially wealthy white women from privileged families and shit like that, fuck them bitches. Straight up. I'm here to tell you. Because many of you motherfuckers own slaves, were staunch segregationists, and did everything you can to fucking basically thwart any effort that black men did to improve themselves in their fucking community. So fuck them. They have no business being included in the fucking Civil Rights Act. What they should have had was their own fucking act. Is what they should have had. It's what should have been. But we already know that some hating ass white dude that just so happened to be a Democrat put a monkey wrench in that program. And everybody been falling in line, like Jason Whitlock said on one of them shows a long time ago. Black women, unfortunately, they saw where the wind was blowing. They licked their finger, put it in the air, said, oh, we see where this shit is going. Let's get something for ourselves. Can't fault them for it. It's human nature. Okay, well, if that's what you're going to do, we got to change our strategy. That shit ain't working for us. Title VII does not work for us. It doesn't deal with our unique issues. All it does is characterize us as fucking oppressors to the very women who used to own us. Picture that shit. In what world does that shit make sense?
I put a link in the chat to a book that's breaking down what Gigi's talking about called They Were Her Property.
But again, it goes back to what BG has said, right? You know, a major error was, again, who educates your children, right? And what they're taught. So this, again, that's what all of this boils back down to. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, you have to, you know, guys, you have to look at all the stuff. Watch these videos, man. And then you tell me that if a lot of that language doesn't sound the same now as it did back then, right? With the exception of some tweaks, you know, with the exception of some tweaks, you know, here and there. You know, again, you're getting the same language, which is to why many this is off-putting. And you know what? One of the things that I would highly recommend like what Nameless was saying in terms of, being your own in group, and everything else, is that, one of the problems that we had so long in politics is because, one, you didn't have a voice, and without that voice, people don't know what you want, right? And so if nobody knows what you want, and if nobody knows you, which is what happened to us, right, you are at a political loss. And so even for me, coming from the background that I come from, right, Dr. Johnson put out a 14-point plan, and I'm reading it, I'm making myself familiar with it, and guess what, right? I'm going to, again, attach myself to that plan, because that's something that speaks specifically to me and the demographic that I belong to.
And
Right?
about his plan. It's not his plan. It's a plan developed by men that's giving him ideas. It's a living document.
Correct. Yes.
Dr. Tiosan Johnson's document is a document that's protean, that's addressing black men's needs right here, right now, and you have the ability to contribute to it. I haven't spoken with Dr. Johnson in maybe a few days, but we intend to do a show, and on that show, we're going to cover, I think the '94 crime bill and what it included, and how the Democrats were primarily responsible for the drafting of this plan and the fucking havoc it wreaked amongst black men.
Yeah.
And now we're being told, like, if you don't vote for them, if you don't vote for me, you just ain't black. I mean, this guy literally came out and said this shit after drafting the crime bill, '94 crime bill.
Correct.
Like, you think we stupid? He told Charlemagne that shit, a black man. And then, Charlemagne did give him the chill, but I mean, at the same time, he was like, hey, wait a minute, like that's, but at the same time, you still courting favor with this dude.
Correct.
But anyway, man, we've been on here too long, man. Like, 2 hours and 30 minutes. We 250, almost 250 in, man. I really love, your contributions and your intellect and what you add. I appreciate that, man, to the fullest. Any closing remarks or thoughts? And I'm going to be quiet, and then we about to close it down.
Yeah, man. Again, that's it. It's just what I said, man. Don't let study your history. We have our scholars in this space. Support them, right? Again, when, BGS, the doctors, the doctors that are out there, you got brother, Kabuki, that I've seen in the chat there, again, support, black men in our intellectual evolution, right? Because I think that you're reaching a point kind of similar to the 1960s, where globally it may have been stymied in the 60s, but I think globally now people are starting to have, or cultures of people are starting to now engage in their own versions of an enlightenment period. And so again, here we are, and this time we have to take we have to just take complete advantage of it. Again, right, one of the things that will help us is to stop being a political football. So by now, we should have learned our lesson, right? So the British loyalists, the Continentals, who you're going to side with, right? And then you side with both of them, you end up right back on the plantation, right? Civil War, right? You side with one side or the other, you end up on the plant, you end up back on the plantation with black codes and Jim Crow, to boot, right? And then you jump back and forth between red and blue. You end up with drugs in your neighborhood, deindustrialization, all the stuff that came with NAFTA, yada yada yada. So it's a gang, it's a gang of Pong. And so, what I'm encouraging, and again, and this is somebody who's been in the Republican Party for years. We are starting to develop, and shout out to our scholars here and BGS, we are now starting to develop the framework and the language for our own body of politics, right? And so again, this ties into what I mentioned before, which is the 10 operational points of diplomacy, right? And so now you're starting to develop your own language and your own politics. And so for me personally, this is going to be the platform, that I'm going to stand with, especially in the fact that it's evolving, and wherever I'm at in the current platform that I'm in, right, with this document, this is what my speaking points will be. And so what we have to do, and shout out to Brother Art when I had the thing, is that, and I'm not talking about the prophet Jesus himself, but we have to let go of that colonial Jesus, man. Whether it's the one that's on the picture in your home or in whatever ideology that you follow within this system that you think is going to lead to your liberation, right? So again, many of you have seen me on panels, right? I don't come on any panel and defend my political ideologies at all costs, because it goes back to what Gigi says. There are things very specific about me and my life which influences the decisions that I make. And for many of you, there are things that are specific about your lives that influences the decision that you make. But now that we have the space and we're starting to develop our own intellectual identity and speak, I think that slowly but surely we all need to migrate. We need to migrate towards that and build upon it, right? If we, eventually, want to get to our promised land. So that's all I got, fam.
Thank you, Dogg.
Rue.
Nameless, man. You got some closing remarks you'd like to put forward?
Just a few. Won't take long. Sandog covered the majority of it. So did you, Gigi. Number one, thanks for having me up, family. It's always a pleasure. I really am glad we were able to really highlight these points and really distinguish. Again, we need to be our own in group. The idea that I try to push is the fact that, while we're online in these spaces, we're like the hidden village. Maybe I can sit down and break down another conversation about how people in antiquity have dealt with being in the position that Black men are in right now. But again, when I say political prisoner, it just means that we have never stopped being in a state of war and conflict. It's just that, as Sandog describes, we're not really suffering directly from hard power, but more so the soft power. Information warfare is a thing. I encourage you guys in your free time, please Google that. Look at it alongside this idea of marketing, and I think you'll have an understanding of what's going on, the use of this space, the use of this information that's being presented to you, and why I advocate for the idea of political Mandalorianism or being voters of fortune. We can't look at politics as some sort of party that you're married to. As Sandog described earlier, and as we've been showing you the history of, none of these parties have your best interests. The only people who can have your interests are you. These political pathways are nothing more than modalities of directions. They need to serve you. And if they're not serving you, you don't need to deal with them. Act accordingly. It's really that simple. But that said, Sandog, again, thanks for having me up. Gigi, thanks for having me up. To the folks in the panel and the folks on the chat, os,
bro. Look, my closing words are thank you both for coming to have a conversation. You're always welcome. As long as you want to keep this going, you can. You can be regular fixtures here. Anytime y'all get ready. But all I can say is, man, it is them. It ain't us, man. It ain't, like Black folks ain't looked for the big payback. I mean, I know you hear James Brown talk, but there ain't no payback coming from us, man. All we want to do is be included. It's a party going on. Everybody, got champagne in the glass, and they getting hors d'oeuvres and all kind of finger food and little motherfucking, Cheez-Its and shit, and enjoying, all the little accoutrements that come along with being inside the party, but us. Hey, man, if you don't let us in that fucking party soon, fuck your party. Fuck everything y'all got going on inside that bitch. Sorry, but that's just how it is. I don't care if you don't fucking like it. I don't give a shit. I don't give a fuck how dangerous you think it might get. I don't give a fuck how offensive you think it might sound. But you ain't gonna party at my expense. Not forever. At some point, I'm about to tear that party into fucking pieces. It just is what it is. So having said that, man, I'm out this joint, man. So y'all be peaceful, man. I'll holler at y'all on the next one. One. Yeah, that shit.